The air in courtroom 4B felt like it had been sucked out by a vacuum, leaving only the oxygen-starved scent of old wood and the metallic tang of fear. Roland sat 3 feet away from me, his $3,000 charcoal suit fitting him like armor, a smirk playing on his lips that said he'd already won. He'd spent 6 weeks systematically dismantling my soul, painting me as a grieving, unstable wreck who wasn't fit to hold her own children's hands, let alone raise them. But as my 6-year-old daughter, Hazel, stood up in her pink daisy dress, the smirk didn't just fade, it curdled. When she looked the judge in the eye and asked, "Should I tell you why Daddy really wants us?" I felt the entire world tilt. Roland's scream of "Shut up" wasn't just an outburst. It was the sound of a predator realizing the cage door had just locked from the outside. He thought he was stealing a fortune. He didn't realize he was handing me the shovel to bury him. To understand how I ended up on the verge of losing my children in a Buckhead courtroom, you have to understand the slow, poisonous erosion of a 10-year marriage. My name is Roland Greystone. For a decade, I believed I was the partner of a rising real estate mogul. I believed in the late nights, the stressful deals, and the distant, cold atmosphere that had settled over our home like a winter that wouldn't end. I was the quiet wife, the librarian who found peace in the stacks of the local library while Roland chased the high of the next closing. The real nightmare began the day my mother, Dorothy, died. Cancer is a thief that takes everything, but in the wake of her passing, I realized it had also taken the blindfold off my eyes. While I was sitting by her hospice bed, holding her thin hand and reading her favorite poems, Roland was in his home office, not working on real estate, but working on an exit strategy. I didn't know then that he was drowning in $800,000 of debt. I didn't know that the Mercedes in the driveway was 3 months behind on payments, or that the Rolex on his wrist was the only thing of value he had left. Roland didn't see a grieving wife when he looked at me across the kitchen table. He saw a liability he needed to liquidate. And when he discovered the truth about my mother's estate, a truth she had kept even from me, he transitioned from a husband into a high-functioning sociopath. The divorce papers arrived on a Saturday morning, served while I was making dinosaur-shaped pancakes for my 8-year-old son, Timothy. Roland didn't offer a conversation or a reason. He just placed the manila envelope next to the syrup and told me I was unfit. He'd spent months documenting my grief, taking photos of me crying at the grocery store, and recording my moments of exhaustion as evidence of emotional instability. He turned my love for my mother into a weapon to be used against my children. The custody hearing was a masterclass in professional gaslighting. Roland's lawyer, Victor Ashford, was a man who looked like he'd sold his soul for a better silk tie. He stood before Judge Patricia Thornwell and wove a narrative of a broken woman who lived in a fog of depression. He brought in neighbors who'd been fed lies and business partners who testified that I was disconnected. I sat there, clutching the hand of my legal aid lawyer, Janet Riverside, feeling like I was watching a movie of a life I didn't recognize. But Roland had made one fatal mistake. He underestimated the children he viewed as nothing more than golden tickets to a trust fund. He had coached Timothy and Hazel for weeks. He'd told them that I was sick in the head, that I was going away to a special hospital, and that if they didn't tell the judge they wanted to live with him, they would end up in foster care. He used the ultimate weapon, the fear of abandonment. Timothy went first. My brave, sensitive boy sat in that oversized chair, his funeral suit too big for his small shoulders. I watched him struggle, his eyes darting to Roland for approval. When he whispered that "Mommy needs help," I felt a physical pain in my chest, a sensation like my ribs were being crushed. Roland leaned back, the picture of a concerned, successful father. He was winning. He was 5 minutes away from being granted full custody and, with it, the keys to a $2 million inheritance my mother had left for the children's future. Then, Hazel took the stand. Hazel was 6, but she had my mother's eyes, sharp, observant, and utterly unimpressed by bullies. She'd insisted on wearing the daisy dress. She said it made her feel brave. When Judge Thornwell asked her about life at home, Roland gave her a sharp, commanding nod. He expected the rehearsed script. He expected her to say I forgot to make lunch. He expected her to say I cried too much. Instead, Hazel looked at the judge and said, "Mommy cries because she misses Grandma. And that's okay, Because Grandma was wonderful. The room shifted. I saw Judge Thornwell's pen stop moving. But Daddy told us to lie, Hazel continued, her voice growing stronger, echoing off the high ceilings. He made us practice in the car. He said if we didn't help him win, we'd never see Mommy again. That was the moment Roland lost control. He stood up, his chair screeching like a wounded animal. Shut up. Don't listen to her. She's confused. The gavel hit the bench with the force of a thunderclap. Bailiff, detain him. Judge Thornwell roared. Mr. Greystone, one more word and you will leave this courtroom in handcuffs. Roland was forced back into his seat, his face a mask of purple rage, but Hazel wasn't finished. She turned her gaze back to the judge, a tiny warrior in a pink dress. Your Honor, should I tell you why Daddy really wants us? The thing he said about the money Grandma left. He was on the phone with Veronica. He said he was going to throw Mommy out like trash once he got the $2 million. The word Veronica hit the room like a grenade. I saw Ashford, Roland's high-priced lawyer, close his eyes and lean back. He knew. The distraught, grieving father had been caught in a web of his own making. Hazel explained it all, how she'd hidden behind the couch and heard Roland bragging to his girlfriend about how judges always believe men in nice suits. She told the court how Roland's real estate business was a lie, how he owed bad people money, and how he planned to use the children's trust fund to buy a beach house in Florida with his mistress. The betrayal was total. It wasn't just a divorce, it was a heist. Timothy, seeing his sister's courage, stood up from the gallery. I heard it too, he shouted, his voice cracking. He told me he'd send Mom away if I didn't say she was crazy. Judge Thornwell didn't even retire to her chambers. She looked at Roland with a level of disgust I had never seen directed at another human being. Mr. Greystone, she said, her voice like ice. I have seen many things in this court, but I have rarely seen a father use his own children as pawns in a financial fraud. You have committed perjury, you have concealed assets, and you have attempted to emotionally abuse 2 minors into committing fraud for your benefit. The ruling was a landslide. I was granted immediate, full legal and physical custody. Roland was stripped of his rights, his bank accounts were frozen for investigation, and he was ordered to stay away from our home. The successful mogul was escorted out of the courtroom by 2 bailiffs, his $3,000 suit now looking like a cheap costume. As we walked out of the courthouse, the October sun felt like a benediction. I knelt on the stone steps and pulled Hazel and Timothy into a hug so tight I could feel their hearts beating against mine. You were so brave, I whispered, tears finally falling, but these weren't the tears of a victim. They were the tears of a mother who had just seen her children save her life. Grandma said to be brave, Hazel whispered into my ear. In my dream, she said the truth always wins, even when the liars wear fancy clothes. In the months that followed, the full extent of Roland's collapse was revealed. His company filed for bankruptcy. Veronica, his soulmate, vanished the moment the trust fund was frozen. He ended up working a job at a car dealership, his wages garnished to pay for the child support he tried so hard to avoid. I went back to the library, but not as the shadow wife. I went back as a woman who knew her worth. My mother's trust fund, the $2.3 million she'd saved through a lifetime of quiet intelligence, is safe. It's waiting for Hazel and Timothy to build the futures they choose, not the ones a predator tried to steal. Every night, when I tuck them in, I remember the sound of that gavel. I remember the sight of the daisy dress. And I remember that sometimes, the most powerful thing in the world isn't a lawyer's argument or a millionaire's bank account. It's the truth, spoken by a child who refuses to let love be treated like trash. If you are fighting a battle you think you can't win, if someone is trying to use your heart as a weapon against you, remember this, the truth has a way of finding the light. Keep standing. Keep fighting. And never underestimate the power of a brave soul who knows exactly who they are. Thanks for watching.